The bell above the door chimed once, soft but clear, and Joe Harper looked up from the coffee pot. A child stood there, rainwater darkening the cuffs of her coat, braids clinging to her face. Her shoes squeaked as she stepped closer to the counter, one hand clutching a folded slip of paper. "Morning, sweetheart," Joe said gently. "You out alone?" She nodded, calm in a way that made him pause. Then with both hands she held the paper forward. "Sir," she said, her voice small but sure, "this isn't for me." Joe frowned slightly and reached out. The damp slip unfurled between his fingers. The barcode still showed through, sharp against the blur of smeared ink. For a heartbeat, he simply stared, recognizing the bright logo printed at the top. A lottery ticket. "Where'd you get this?" he asked quietly. "By the bakery," she answered. "It was blowing near the fence. I thought it might belong here." Something in her tone reached straight through his tired morning calm. The shop hummed with its usual small noises, the cooler, the roof's slow drip, but the air between them held a weight that wasn't ordinary. A soaked little girl handing over what might be fortune itself, claiming it wasn't hers. Joe nodded slowly. "Well now," he said, more softly this time, "let's have a look. Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from." Lila Bennett lived 2 streets past the river bend in a small rented duplex with peeling blue paint and a yard just wide enough for one clothesline. The morning she found the ticket had started like any other. Quiet, gray, with the hum of her mother's alarm cutting through the walls. Her mother, Marianne, worked nights at the laundry. The sound of her return was always the same. Shoes kicked off, key dropped in the ceramic dish by the sink, a tired groan that softened when she peeked in on Lila before catching a few hours of sleep. They lived by a rhythm that left little space for surprises. That morning, Lila had poured the last of the cereal into her bowl, tiny shreds of sweetness falling like dust. The carton of milk stood empty except for a thin white line at the bottom. She used all of it and smiled faintly at the way it fizzed around the spoon. Her shoes were cracked at the sides. She tied them tight so they would last a little longer. Marianne's voice drifted from the couch. "Honey, remember, Mrs. Boyle needs her paper picked up today." She twisted her ankle again. Lila nodded, pulling on her jacket. "I'll stop by after school." "You're my good girl," Marianne murmured, half asleep. "Do right even when no one's watching. That's the rule." It was the phrase that shaped every small choice Lila made, the one she'd repeat in her head when tempted to cut corners or keep what wasn't hers. Even at 8, she carried that rule like a light in her pocket. By mid-afternoon, she walked home by habit, tracing the cracked sidewalk near Weaver's Bakery, where the scent of bread floated out in warm clouds. The air had that cool, heavy stillness before rain. She tightened her jacket, clutching the coins meant for a loaf that evening. Across the street, Mrs. Boyle waved from her porch, lifting the wrapped newspaper with a smile of thanks. "You're an angel, dear," Lila laughed. "Mom says angels don't take pay." Mrs. Boyle shook her head fondly. "Then you're one of the rare kind." The wind picked up as Lila neared the bakery. A scrap of paper lifted from the curb, tumbling over itself in a restless dance. Without thinking, she chased it a few steps. It snagged against her ankle, plastered by the damp, bright with color. It wasn't just paper. It shimmered faintly where the ink had run, edges softened by water. She peeled it free and saw the printed grid of numbers, still legible. A lottery ticket. Someone's hope, left to float across the gutter. For a long moment, she just stared. She'd seen people at the counter clutch tickets like fragile dreams, talking about what they'd buy. It seemed foolish and magical all at once. She brushed rain from her forehead and looked down the street. No one in sight. The bakery door was closed. A Back in 5 sign swinging in the window. The only sound was the rustle of leaves and the soft tap of rain against her hood. Her stomach fluttered with thoughts she couldn't name. The number printed on the corner looked recent, a draw date she remembered from the chatter at the store that morning. The clerk had joked that someone in town might be rich by nightfall, if they just kept their tickets safe. Lila's thumb traced the torn edge. She imagined for a second what a winning one might mean. Her mother's tired face brightening, shoes without holes, cupboards not echoing when opened. But the thought made her skin prickle. That wasn't the rule. Do right even when no one's watching, she whispered. Still, her hand trembled slightly as she folded the ticket and slipped it into her pocket. It didn't feel right to toss it away, but she couldn't bring herself to claim it either. Maybe she could take it to the store after school, ask if someone had lost it. She walked home slower than usual, the ticket a tiny weight against her hip. Inside the duplex, Marianne was setting the table. 2 plates, a basket for bread that hadn't yet arrived. Did the bakery run out? Marianne asked. Lila blinked. Not yet. I'll go back in a bit. Her mother didn't question it. There was always some errand delayed, some line still forming when the ovens cooled. They ate soup from a can instead, Marianne's hands red from detergent and steam. When Lila asked about the long hours, her mother only smiled tiredly. It's honest work. That's enough. After dinner, Lila sat by the window with her homework, the hum of a neighbor's TV drifting through the wall. Outside, rain thickened over the streetlights, coating everything in a haze. She fingered the ticket again, watching how the lamplight caught its glossy surface. It didn't look like much. Thin paper, almost worthless until someone said the numbers aloud. Her child's curiosity battled something else. Fear, maybe. Or duty. She had overheard the store owner's nephew earlier bragging that his uncle, Mr. Blaine, might close the shop soon because of bad luck and overdue bills. That memory settled heavy in her chest as she imagined walking in with the ticket. What if it was his? What if it saved him? By the time she climbed into bed, the thought had hardened into a quiet plan. Tomorrow, after school, she would take it to Harper's general store. No one needed to tell her it was the right thing. She felt it somewhere deep, older than her 8 years. As she drifted toward sleep, Marianne's voice echoed softly in her mind. Do right, even when no one's watching. The same old phrase, the same quiet conviction. Outside, the rain tapped against the roof, steady as breathing, and under her pillow, the folded ticket waited, faintly damp, faintly shining, the beginning of something larger than either of them could yet imagine. The next morning dawned clearer, but heavy with leftover mist, streets beaded with last night's rain. Lila stepped out in her patched jacket, the folded ticket tucked deep inside her school bag. Each step toward the corner bus stop seemed louder than usual, the hush after a storm pressing close around her. She thought briefly about showing it to her mother, but Marianne worried easily. A piece of paper that might be worth a fortune, or nothing, would only stir questions neither of them could answer. Better to figure it out herself. The rule, as always, was simple. Do what's right, then tell someone when the deed is done. At school, her concentration wavered. Numbers drifted on the chalkboard while she traced faint grids on her notebook, like the ones printed on the ticket. At recess, she sat apart on the low stone wall near the playground. Her friend Sarah plopped beside her, swinging her legs. You look funny, Sarah said, tugging her scarf tight. Like you swallowed a secret. Lila shrugged. It's just a thing I found. Sarah grinned. What thing? Just a paper, Lila murmured. I'll give it back later. That ended the talk. Sarah chased others across the wet pavement, leaving her alone with her thoughts. By afternoon, the clouds began to thin. Sunlight spilled through the windows as the final bell rang. Lila packed her books and felt the small, deliberate weight of the ticket pressing against the fabric of the bag. She could have gone straight home, but her decision was made. The main street curved ahead, still slick in places. Harper's general store sat near the end, its faded red sign missing one letter. A wooden step creaked as she climbed up to the door, holding her breath as the metal handle bit cool against her palm. Inside, the air smelled of ground coffee and old wood. Joe Harper wasn't at the counter today. Instead, his niece, Carla, stacked newspapers near the door. Lila hesitated, unsure whether to leave the ticket or speak. Carla noticed her. Hey there, kiddo. You look like you lost something. I found something, Lila said, but I think it might belong to Mr. Blaine. He owns this place, right? Carla paused, mid-stack, her expression softening. That's right. He's in the back office, though I don't know if he's taking visitors. It's important. Lila said carefully. Carla tilted her head, perhaps catching the seriousness behind the small voice. She disappeared through a narrow door at the end of the aisle, her voice muffled as she called, "Uncle, there's a little girl here, says it's important." While Lila waited, she studied the rows of canned goods, the old clock ticking above the register. Minutes stretched until a faint shuffle of steps emerged from the back. She turned and saw him. Mr. Blaine looked older than she remembered from neighborhood glimpses. Tall but slightly bent at the shoulders, his gray hair swept back, eyes the clear blue of winter sky. He held a ledger open in one hand and a pen capped behind his ear. "Well, who do we have here?" he asked, a hint of surprise in his tone. "I'm Lila," she said quickly. "Lila Bennett. I wanted to bring this to you." He set the ledger down. "Bring what?" From her school bag, she pulled the folded ticket, pressing the creases flat against her palm. "It was blowing near the bakery. I thought someone from here might have lost it." He took it gently, the edges still damp, staring as if unsure what he saw. "You just picked it up?" "Yes, sir. I didn't want to keep it." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "It didn't feel mine." Mr. Blaine's thumb brushed over the numbers. For a second, something flickered in his expression, a recognition tinged with disbelief, then a weary smile. "You found a lottery ticket," he said aloud, as though confirming the absurd. He walked slowly behind the counter, reaching for his reading glasses. "You'd be surprised how many of these we sweep from the floor each week. Most folks don't even check them." "I heard people talking," Lila ventured, her voice small. "They said someone lost a ticket that might have the winning numbers." He looked up sharply, gaze narrowing. "You heard that?" "Yes, sir. Yesterday morning by the store. Some men said your shop sold it." Silence filled the space, a kind that settled deep. Mr. Blaine leaned on the counter's edge, glasses slipping slightly down his nose. "They weren't wrong," he muttered. "I did sell one right before closing. Customer never came back." The register clicked as he punched a code, scanning the ticket's barcode under the reader. The small screen blinked, then flashed a message he didn't expect. His breath left him in a faint sound, halfway between a laugh and a sigh. He stared at the numbers again, one wrinkled hand trembling. "Sir?" Lila asked, anxious. He blinked, clearing his throat. "The machine says this one was a jackpot." She frowned. "That means it wins. That means it wins," he repeated quietly. His gaze flicked to her soaked braid, the scuffed toes of her shoes. "You could have kept it." She shook her head quickly. "No, I wasn't supposed to." He studied her for a long moment. The store's hum seemed to fade, the ceiling fan, the chatter from the street, even Carla's voice in the back. All that remained was the honesty shining plainly from the child who had walked into his fading little world and placed fortune in his hands. "Do you know," he said softly, "how much this is worth?" Lila hesitated. "A lot. More than you'd believe." He folded the paper carefully, the way one might handle a relic, not just a claim slip. "And you found it in the street?" "Yes." He exhaled slowly and nodded. "Thank you, Lila Bennett." She nodded once in return, relieved more than proud. "Can you make sure it gets back to who lost it?" "I'll do my best," he said quietly. Then, after a pause, "Would it be all right if I spoke with your mother later?" She stiffened slightly, unsure what that meant, but his tone was kind, grateful even. "Okay," she said. "Good." His voice warmed. "Now, you best get home before the next rain." Lila nodded again, turning to leave. The bell above the door chimed softly as she stepped onto the porch, wind brushing her face. For a second she thought she heard a faint laugh from inside, not of amusement but wonder, the sound of disbelief giving way to hope. As she walked down the wet sidewalk, her thoughts tangled between confusion and peace. She hadn't needed to know the value to understand that giving it back was right. Her pocket felt light without the folded ticket, but her chest felt strangely full. By the time she reached home, streetlights had begun to flicker on, halos forming in the damp air. She paused at the gate, seeing her mother's silhouette moving through the kitchen window, the familiar rhythm of evening settling again. Inside, Marianne smiled through her fatigue. "You made it, honey. Did you stop by the store?" "Yes," Lila whispered. "I gave something back." Her mother's brows rose, curious but not pressing. "That sounds like you." Lila smiled faintly. "I think so." As her mother turned back to the stove, the smell of soup filling the room, Lila glanced once toward the window where the rain streaked glass again. Somewhere behind those clouds, a lottery ticket no longer lost waited in careful hands, and though she didn't know it yet, her small act had already started to stir the town awake. And in the back office of Harper's General Store, Mr. Blaine sat alone under the humming light, staring at the ticket and whispering, as though confiding to someone long gone, someone honest still out there, after all. By the next morning, Mr. Blaine hadn't slept. The pale light through the shop windows made the shelves look ghostly, every jar and can rimmed in dust. On the counter, the lottery ticket rested inside a plastic sleeve, a thin paper bridge between ruin and relief. He stared at it the way a sailor stares at a far harbor, close enough to imagine, still too far to claim. He poured himself coffee that had gone lukewarm hours ago. His hands weren't as steady as they once were. Years of bookkeeping had cramped the fingers, but it wasn't arthritis that made them shake. It was the thought of what this slip could fix, the unpaid loan on the building, the medicine his doctor warned him not to skip, the letters from the bank he hadn't opened yet. Outside, the morning rain returned. Polite, but insistent. It tapped against the window like someone reminding him he was late for something. He set the mug down, glanced at the photograph tacked to the register. A young woman, smiling beneath a picnic hat, her eyes bright. The edges of the photo had curled from years of exposure. "You'd tell me what to do, wouldn't you, May?" he muttered. But May had been gone 12 years. Since then, he had managed the store alone, patching leaks, counting stock, and trying not to need anyone again. The customers noticed the changes anyway. "Blaine's getting on," they whispered in the aisles. "Good man, but he should sell while there's time." He never answered gossip. A store kept long enough becomes an extension of its keeper. The creak in the floorboards, the chipped countertop, the familiar smell of coffee and dust. What would he be without it? When the bell above the door chimed, he half hoped it might be the girl again. Instead, it was Carla with 2 paper cups. "You look like you didn't sleep, Uncle." "I didn't." He rubbed his eyes. "Too much counting." "Counting what?" He gestured to the counter. "A blessing or a test? Haven't decided." Carla followed his gaze and frowned. "That the ticket? The one that kid brought?" He nodded. "You verified it?" "Yes." A low whistle escaped her. "And it's real?" "Every cent of it." She leaned against the counter. "Then why do you look like someone told you bad news?" He almost smiled. "Because I don't know what to do with good news anymore." Carla studied him for a moment. "You could claim it. No law says otherwise." "There's law, and then there's right." His voice softened. "That child could have kept it, but she didn't. She walked here through rain and gave it back. You think I can take it now and call it mine?" "You sold the ticket," Carla reminded him. "That makes it yours by record." "I sold it, yes, but whoever dropped it lost more than paper. Maybe their chance, maybe their relief. I can't know." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You always think in circles," she said quietly. He chuckled without humor. "That's what keeps me standing." When she left to restock the delivery truck, he sat at the counter again, studying the ticket until the numbers blurred. There were options, of course. Claim it privately, donate a portion, pay off debts quietly enough that people might assume modest fortune. Yet none of those felt clean. Each choice carried its own shadow, a sense that he was rewriting the truth of what the girl had done. By noon, he pulled the shop ledger toward him, more for habit than need. The pencil tips scratched through columns of numbers that dipped lower each month. Profits had thinned to air. Last winter, the furnace had died, and he'd nearly shut the doors for good. If not for the small savings May left, he might have. The smell of rain mixed with the faint sweetness of produce from the corner. Customers came and went, unaware that fortune sat between the daily bread and milk. Mr. Blaine greeted them as always, slow but polite, folding paper bags, counting change. Every simple task steadied him, yet the knowledge of that ticket pressed behind every movement like a pulse. Around mid-afternoon, the mail arrived. Thin envelopes, a few unpaid invoices, one pink slip marked "Final Notice." He placed it beside the ticket. Two symbols of different fates, side by side. The contrast almost made him laugh. As the clock hands crept toward closing, he turned the sign on the door to back in 5 and locked it. The sudden quiet filled the room like fog. He reached for the envelope, kept under the counter, an old stationery case still faintly scented with his wife's perfume. Inside was a letter she had written years before, dated 2 months before her surgery. He'd read it so often the folds had become valleys. "If you ever find yourself alone with a hard choice," she had written, "choose the one that lets you look people in the eye tomorrow. You've never been rich, Arthur, but you've been good. That's better company." He set the letter beside the ticket, the two papers touching edge to edge, as if speaking to each other. The hum of the cooler deepened. Outside, car tires hissed across wet asphalt. He whispered, "You always did know how to simplify it." When the door jangled again, he straightened. To his surprise, Marianne Bennett stepped inside, her coat shiny from the drizzle, eyes weary but warm. "Mr. Blaine?" she asked, hesitating at the entrance. "I hope I'm not disturbing." "Not at all. Come in, please." He wiped his palms on his apron. "You're Lila's mother?" "That's right." She mustered a small smile. "She told me she came here yesterday with a paper she found. I wanted to thank you for being kind to her." He shook his head. "She's the one who showed kindness." He motioned to the counter. "That ticket she brought, it's something special." Marianne blinked. "A ticket?" "Yes," he said softly. "A winning one. Worth more than this old store, that's for certain." She stared, speechless, her hands clasped tightly over one another. "Oh my, she didn't know, did she?" "No, and that's exactly what makes it matter." Marianne let out a trembling breath. "We've been struggling, truth be told. But she's always thinking of right and wrong. Said it's something her father taught her before he passed." Her eyes grew glassy. "He used to remind her that honesty isn't about reward, it's about peace." Mr. Blaine's throat tightened. He was wiser than most. She glanced around the store. The low lights, the patched floor tiles. "Are you going to claim it?" He answered after a beat. "I will have to, legally speaking. But what happens next? That's what keeps me awake." Marianne stepped closer. "Whatever you decide, I hope it's gentle." Her voice faltered. "She sees the world simple. I'd like to keep it that way a little longer." Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the hills. He looked at her, seeing the exhaustion etched around her mouth, the hands that had known detergent and hard labor. In her, he glimpsed what May once told him, how dignity isn't polished, it's persistent. "I'll protect that simplicity," he said. "I promise." She nodded once, as if that were enough. "Thank you." After she left, the sky began to clear. Evening sunlight slipped through the windows, cutting narrow beams across jars of jam and boxes of cereal. Dust motes turned golden in the rays. He gathered the ticket and the letter, sealed them together in a plain white envelope, and wrote a single word on the front: "Tomorrow." As he locked the register, his reflection wavered faintly in the glass of the front door, an old man with too many yesterdays, standing at the edge of the two futures. He looked at both papers one last time and whispered to the empty shop, "May, if you're watching, I think I know what you tell me. Keep your promise. Make someone's morning lighter." Then he turned off the lights and stepped outside into the cooling air. The rain had stopped, leaving the town washed clean, as though waiting for something honest to begin again. By dawn, the store's windows had blurred again with condensation. Mr. Blaine unlocked the door, though he had never really slept. The envelope marked "Tomorrow" sat beneath the register, its white corner poking out like a quiet reminder. He moved through the opening tasks by habit, lights, till, coffee, but every click and hum seemed to echo louder than normal. He lifted the envelope once more, tracing the handwriting. Tomorrow had turned into today. That meant decisions. Before long, Carla arrived, hair tucked under a knit hat. "You still thinking about that ticket?" she asked, adjusting the blinds. "Thinking about what it means," he said. "People call luck a blessing, but sometimes it's a test of character wearing Sunday clothes." Carla raised a brow. "You sound like Aunt May again." He smiled faintly. "I suppose she never left my conscience." The door opened with a squeak, letting in a chill draft and the smell of rain-soaked earth. Marianne Bennett stepped in, her daughter's hand tucked firmly into hers this time. Lila's eyes held that same steady calm as before, but there was worry there too, the kind a child feels when adults have been talking in low voices. "Morning," Marianne began. "You asked to see us." "Yes," he said softly, gesturing to the counter stool. "Thank you for coming." Lila climbed up beside her mother, boots dangling. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," he assured quickly. "Quite the opposite." He hesitated before continuing. "I needed to ask you both something about honesty and trust." Marianne tilted her head. "You already have that from us, I hope." He nodded, grateful but burdened. "That ticket you brought, young lady, it's worth a fortune. Enough to change anyone's life. I wanted proof that it truly came from the street, not from here, not from another customer. Just my bookkeeping talking." Marianne stiffened. "You mean you don't believe her?" His face softened immediately. "I do. Yet the world demands proof, even when faith should suffice." So I looked. He turned the monitor toward them. A grainy security video from 2 afternoons earlier flickered. Rain washing through the doorway, customers leaving, the little girl stepping inside, her hair soaked. She held the ticket in both hands, speaking to Joe at the counter. Lila's eyes widened. "You filmed me?" "The cameras film everything," he said gently. "To protect folks, not accuse them. But when I watched, all I saw was truth." He clicked pause on her small figure, standing straight despite the puddles. The truth was plain enough. Marianne let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you for checking," she said, voice hoarse. "People don't always take a single mother's word." He looked embarrassed. "That's precisely why I wanted you here, to tell you you've raised an extraordinary child." Lila swung her legs quietly. "Did someone lose the ticket?" "I was the one who sold it," he explained. "But no one came to claim the winning numbers. According to the rules, the prize defaults to the store after a deadline." Marianne blinked. "So it's yours?" "In paper, yes. In conscience." He glanced at them both. "Not yet decided." Lila laid her palms on the counter. "I think it's supposed to go to you, Mr. Blaine. The store's yours." He looked at her, emotions knotting in his chest. "Why would you say that?" "Because you looked sad when I brought it," she said simply. "Mom says sad people need good things more than greedy ones." Marianne touched her shoulder, torn between pride and modesty. "Honey, hush." But Mr. Blaine only smiled faintly. "Let her speak. There's more sense in that than most adults manage." He turned toward Marianne. "Ma'am, I want you to know I plan to claim the prize because legally I must, but I can't ignore how it came back to me. Your daughter's honesty is the reason any of this happened." Marianne's eyes dimmed with worry. "We don't need anything from you, sir. Truly. That's not what this is about," he said. "I made a promise long before now, to honor decency when it crosses my path. I lost much in my life, but character was never in short supply around people like you." He looked at Lila again. "When May, my wife, was alive, she ran this place beside me. She used to tuck cash into pay envelopes for workers who'd had a rough month, never telling them who it came from. Said kindness worked best in secret." Lila listened closely, fingers tracing the grooved counter. "My mom says good deeds are like seeds. They grow quiet, but they grow." Her mother smiled, half sad. She hears more than she should. Then she's learned well, Mr. Blaine said. You both have. He handed Marianne a small folded paper. A copy of the claim instructions. Transparency, you could say. I want you to know every step I take. Marianne unfolded it slowly. You're more thorough than most bankers. Not thorough, he said. Just careful with trust. I lost some years ago when a partner took advantage of me. Never thought I'd gain it back. A pause settled between them, filled only by the hum of the cooler. Then he added quietly, Your little girl reminded me what uprightness looks like in daily clothes. The clock ticked. Rain began again outside, gentle this time. Lila asked softly, Do you have kids, Mr. Blaine? His eyes flicked to the photo of a girl framed behind the counter, barely older than Lila, caught mid-laugh beneath summer light. I did, he said. Long ago. She's gone now. Oh, Lila whispered. I'm sorry. He nodded slowly. Me too. She'd have liked you. Same stubborn gentleness. Marianne reached for her daughter's hand. We'll go. Let you open up. Stay, he said quickly. At least long enough for 1 cup of cocoa. I keep the packets for my niece's kids. So they stayed. The steam rose from mismatched mugs, while light crept in through cloud breaks. Conversation came easy. Stories about school, about the laundry where Marianne worked, about how the town smelled like sugar on bakery days. When it was time to leave, Lila hopped off the stool. Thanks for the cocoa. He smiled, eyes watery. Thank you for the reminder that goodness still walks in small shoes. After they left, he stood alone at the window, watching them cross the muddy street. The rain had thinned to mist, each drop vanishing before it hit the ground. He felt May beside him again, whispering through memory, Choose what lets you look people in the eye tomorrow. He took the envelope from beneath the register, slipped his wife's letter inside, then folded a smaller sheet bearing Lila's name. On it, he wrote just 1 line, For courage, without reward. That night, before heading upstairs, he sealed everything together and placed it in the safe. As he turned the key, something in his chest eased, the first calm breath in days. He whispered into the dim store, It's decided then. The decision wasn't about money, not really. It was about believing once more that the world could tilt toward decency when guided by a child's hand. Outside, the streetlight flickered. Somewhere down the block, laughter from a cluster of school children echoed faintly. He smiled toward the sound and switched off the lights, the store sinking into warm darkness, the hum of its refrigerators steady, like a promise being kept. By midweek, word had already made its way from counter talk to coffee tables across town. It started with one delivery driver who swore he'd seen the store owner smiling for the first time in years, and by the second day, every diner booth was reheating the story like leftovers. The version changed with every retelling. A mystery customer, a hidden benefactor. But the part about a little girl handing back a winning ticket stayed the same. At Marianne Bennett's duplex, the phone rang nonstop. Neighbors wanted to congratulate her or ask if it was really true. Someone left a paper bouquet on the porch with a note that read, For raising her right. Lila found it before school and traced the petals with shy fingers. Does this mean people think we're famous? She asked. Marianne chuckled, folding laundry. It means people talk when they're moved. But it's just honesty, Lila said softly. Her mother smiled at that, proud, though she tried to hide it. Honesty looks simple until it costs something, sweetheart. By afternoon, 2 women from the community center stopped by with cookies and curiosity. They sat at the kitchen table like reporters without notebooks, asking about Lila's decision. She didn't even glance twice at that ticket, one asked. Lila shook her head. It wasn't mine. They exchanged looks, half disbelief, half wonder. One murmured, Children could teach us all. When they left, Marianne stood at the window, watching the sedan roll away. The attention unnerved her. She had lived quietly for too long to enjoy being under anyone's gaze. As kind as the faces were, she worried what would follow, expectations, assumptions, maybe even envy. Down at Harper's general store, Mr. Blaine felt it too. Sales doubled overnight. Folks who hadn't visited in years came just to shake his hand, as if some of the luck might rub off. "You're a blessed man, Arthur," one said while paying for gas tokens. He only smiled faintly. Blessed by a child's good heart, yes. Behind the counter, Carla noticed his unease. "You didn't want fame for this, did you?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "You can't breathe an air this thin." Still, he thanked every visitor, accepted every awkward compliment. It was part of his promise. Yet when the newspaper photographer showed up, camera slung over one shoulder, he nearly turned him away. "I'm doing a positive piece," the man explained. "Something the town needs. The girl's a hero." "She's a child," Blaine corrected gently. "Let her stay one." The article ran anyway. Black and white photo of the storefront under a headline that read, "Luck returned by little hands." Lila's name appeared only once, buried in the third paragraph, but that was enough. The next day at school, classmates whispered her name like it was suddenly special. Some asked if she'd really given away a fortune. Others joked that she should pick their raffle numbers next time. Teachers gave her knowing smiles. It felt strange, all of it, the attention like a wire buzzing under her skin. At lunch, she pushed peas around her tray while Sarah leaned close. "My mom says you're the honest girl." Lila shrugged. "I just did what Mom taught me." "You could have been rich." The words landed heavy. Rich wasn't something Lila ever pictured. It sounded like a costume that didn't fit. "Maybe," she said, "but then Mr. Blaine wouldn't be happy." Sarah thought for a second. "Would you be happier?" Lila looked to the window where light spilled through trees. "I'm happy enough." That night, Marianne noticed the quiet at dinner. "Rough day?" "People talk too much," Lila murmured. "About you." She nodded. Marianne reached across the table. "That'll fade. What matters stays inside you." Meanwhile, across town, Mr. Blaine made his own plan for silence. He kept the store open just long enough to steady rumors, then posted a handwritten sign, "Closed early for repairs." Locals speculated it meant renovations with new winnings, but Carla, helping him switch off the lights, sensed otherwise. "You hiding from the celebration?" she teased lightly. "Making room for it," he said. "In private." He slipped an envelope into his coat pocket and locked the door. The next morning, Marianne woke to a knock. On the stoop sat a small package wrapped in brown paper, her name in careful handwriting. Inside lay a simple note. "For what can't be purchased, thank you." Beneath it rested a folded envelope with the store's letterhead. She opened it hesitantly. Inside was a check, modest compared to the rumored jackpot, yet enough to clear debts, buy shoes, fix the leaky roof. Her hand trembled as she read the final line. "This is not payment. It's participation and your daughter's honesty." Lila found her staring at it. "Is it from Mr. Blaine?" Marianne nodded slowly. "He never stops surprising me." "What will we do with it?" "Something quiet," Marianne said. "Something kind, like he would." They decided together to pay off the overdue rent and donate a portion to the town library's children's fund. When the librarian heard, tears welled behind her glasses. "Your little one doesn't just give back, she multiplies good." Still, not everyone cheered. At the diner counter, two regulars argued whether the gesture was staged. "Publicity stunt?" one said. "Old Blaine needed sympathy for that rusty shop." The other shook his head. "You didn't see that kid's face on the article. That wasn't pretend." Gossip swirled, as gossip does, until it tired itself out. The story no longer belonged to any teller. It had rooted into town memory, part truth, part legend. Children began leaving small notes in the store's donation jar. "For someone who needs it more," written in shaky pencil. A week later, when Harper's reopened, the shelves gleamed. A sign above the counter read, "Honesty served here." Mr. Blaine greeted a steady stream of visitors, refusing credit for what had unfolded. It was the rain that washed us clean, he joked softly to Carla, and one little girl brave enough to let it. That evening, Marianne and Lila stopped by. The counters smelled of lemon oil, and a new bell hung above the door. Thought you were closed for repairs, Marianne said, smiling. Repairs done, Blaine replied. At least the kind that can be fixed with a screwdriver. He crouched to meet Lila's eyes. Thank you, young lady, for reminding the rest of us what honest work looks like. Lila blushed. I didn't do anything big. You did everything right, he said. As they left, a handful of neighbors waved from the sidewalk. Someone started humming a tune, soft and cheerful. The town felt lighter, as though a window had been opened in every household. That night, as dusk settled over the river, Marianne drew the curtains and watched her daughter tidy the table. The girl moved with quiet purpose, unaware of how wide her ripple had spread. Marianne whispered to no one in particular, She's growing up good in a world that's forgotten how. From the distance came the faint sound of the new store bell, a bright note carried on the evening breeze, a reminder of how a simple act can echo far beyond its beginning. The Bennetts listened until it faded, then turned off their lights, letting the town rest in its newfound calm. The day after the town quieted, Mr. Blaine phoned Marianne. His message was brief. If you have a little time this evening, bring Lila by. I've got something to show her. She almost said no. The week's attention had left them both tired, and she feared any new kindness might come with strings. Praise, publicity, another headline. Yet, there was something in his voice that sounded more like farewell than ceremony. By sunset, she buttoned her coat and took Lila's hand. Harper's store sat half-lit, its front sign dark and the curtains drawn. A note on the door read, Closed early for repairs. Marianne hesitated. Maybe we've got the wrong night. Before she could knock, the latch clicked. It's the right one, said Mr. Blaine, stepping aside. Inside, the shop smelled of lemon polish and coffee. Counters gleamed. Boxes were stacked neat. The only light came from a single bulb above the register, shining on the sealed safe behind him. Lila climbed onto her usual stool, while Marianne stood nearby, uneasy. You didn't have to open for us, she said. This isn't business, he replied. It's thanks. He opened the safe and drew out a thick envelope bound with a paperclip. Beneath it lay his wife's letter, edges soft with age. He set both on the counter. Yesterday the claim posted, he said quietly. The ticket cleared. Turns out the prize was larger than anyone guessed. Marianne smiled faintly, unsure what that meant for her. Then congratulations are in order. He shook his head. Not exactly. I called because I can't keep it all. She blinked. What do you mean, can't? Because it wasn't mine alone, he said. It was found by hands that refused temptation. It returned because your little girl believed right mattered more than want. If that faith isn't rewarded, the money's worth nothing. He pushed the envelope toward them. This is your share. Marianne stared at it as if it were burning. We couldn't. Truly, we don't need... You do, he interrupted gently. And that's no shame. It's what any honest storekeeper would do. Make the balance fair. Lila looked between them. Is that the ticket money? He smiled. Part of it. Enough to unfasten some worries. Marianne shook her head quickly. Mr. Blaine, please. You owe us nothing. Oh? His eyes softened. This isn't debt. It's gratitude in currency form. If I keep it all, I betray the reason it ever came back. For a long moment, no one spoke. Dust glimmered in the cone of lamplight. Outside, a June cricket broke the silence. Then Lila reached for the envelope, touched it with one forefinger, and slid it gently back. We already got what we needed, she said. Blaine looked startled. And what's that, young lady? That you're not closing the store, she said simply. That was enough. The old man's mouth curved into a tremor of a smile. You sound like my wife, he murmured. Marianne exhaled shakily. I must insist you keep the rest, at least until you're sure your finances are steady. He chuckled softly. You talk like a banker. I'm steady enough. Steadier, thanks to all this. He lifted the letter by its corner. Before May passed, she wrote that integrity would outlast survival if I tended it. I didn't understand then. Tonight, I do. Lila tilted her head. Was May nice like you? She was better, he said. She believed small kindness is the real fortune. He opened the envelope anyway and pressed a smaller, sealed portion toward Marianne. Take this part, if nothing else. Consider it investment in Honesty's future. You could pay down debts, fix what leaks, maybe fill a shelf with books for that girl. Marianne's fingers hovered above it, trembling. You make refusal hard. That's the point, he said, smiling. Let an old man feel useful. She finally accepted it, placing it carefully in her bag. Then we'll use it wisely, quietly. Lila studied him. Will you buy something too? A bit of peace, he said, and maybe new counters before these splinters take revenge. They laughed softly, tension easing like a sigh. He poured 3 cups from a small thermos, 2 of cocoa, 1 of coffee, and raised his mug. To doing right when no one's watching, Marianne echoed it. To the people who notice anyway. Lila lifted her cup with care. To May, she added. The old man's throat tightened. He nodded, eyes bright. Yes, to May. For a long while, they sat at the counter, sipping in companionable silence. The rain had stopped outside, replaced by distant frogs and the hum of streetlights. Somewhere down the block, a train horn stretched across the valley, a low, steady note that made everything feel both ending and beginning at once. When the mugs were empty, Mr. Blaine walked them to the door. Marianne turned back. You've given us more than money, she said softly. And you've given me back faith, he replied. Fair trade, if you ask me. He watched them cross the street, mother and child small against the dusk. A child who could have changed her life overnight and instead chose truth. He closed the door gently, the bell giving a single, tired chime. Inside, the store felt wider somehow. He moved through the aisles, turning off lights, humming an old tune his wife used to sing when counting the drawer. At the counter he paused, unfolded her letter once more, and read the last lines aloud. When luck finds you, remember whose hands carried it there. He drew a match from his pocket, struck it, and touched flame to the letter's edge. The paper curled, blackening but glowing beautiful as it went. He carried it to the back door, opened it, and let the ashes drift into the night air. They rose briefly, flaring orange before vanishing into the dark. Thank you, May, he whispered. In the distance, he could still see Marianne's figure, Lila skipping beside her, the envelope held close against her chest to keep the wind off. The sight steadied him in a way no legal document or bank check ever could. He turned back into the dim store, the counter still warm from their hands, and whispered again, as though finishing a prayer. I think you'd like them, my love. The world's still safe in honest keeping. Down the street, 2 lamps flickered to life, casting long reflections across the wet pavement. The hum of the coolers filled the quiet space like a soft heartbeat. Mr. Blaine leaned against the counter and closed his eyes, not in weariness, but in calm. Tomorrow would bring new customers, new chatter, maybe more stories borrowed from truth. For now, there was only peace, the kind that comes after choosing the harder right, the kind a small girl had taught him to believe in again. Summer settled slow over the town, heat shimmering above the asphalt and turning the river to glass. Marianne Bennett stretched her nights at the laundry into extra shifts, though now she could have afforded to ease back. The small portion Mr. Blaine had given covered the rent with months to spare, repaired the roof, even bought her a secondhand washing machine, but habits rooted in scarcity don't vanish with one check. She still folded shirts by hand and lined every dollar in her notebook like soldiers ready for inspection. Lila didn't notice the numbers much. What she saw was that her mother's face looked less tired in the mornings, that dinner came with fresh bread instead of crackers, that the new shoes on her feet didn't pinch. Yet their rhythm of life, homework at the table, chores before bed, slow Sundays, stayed the same. We keep what's good and mend what's broken, Marianne said one evening as they sorted laundry. Money can help with the mending, but it can't do the keeping. By midsummer, the town's excitement dimmed into neighborly respect. The story of the lottery girl turned from rumor into lesson. Teachers slipped her name into morning assemblies. Church sermons carried nods to honesty's reward. Lila grew used to kind glances from shopkeepers and the occasional cookie tucked in a bag. What unsettled her were the strangers who stopped her on errands. They asked what honesty felt like, as if it were a trick one could learn. She only shrugged. Like breathing, she'd say, though sometimes she wondered if breathing had ever drawn this much attention. On one bright Saturday, Mr. Blaine came by with a box of apples, and a slight blush from the heat. He insisted Marianne take half, citing inventory overflow. When Lila offered to help at the store, he agreed on one condition, that it be after homework, wages payable in stories. She accepted eagerly. Each afternoon she walked to Harper's, apron tied twice around her waist, sweeping the aisles and counting change under his patient eye. Math isn't about numbers, he told her. It's about fairness. Between customers, he taught her phrases from his old ledgers, how to label stock, how to tell when people needed mercy more than rules. She listened like a sponge, soaking sun-warm water. Sometimes he'd rest on a stool, breath shallow, pressing a hand to his chest. Doctor says it's just tired valves, he joked. Old hearts leak like roofs. Lila pretended not to notice the faint paleness that followed. She would refill his glass of water and slide his reading glasses closer, quiet as a nurse. As summer browned into early fall, the pair became fixtures, the old owner with his miniature helper. Customers lingered just to smile at the sight. She's good for you, Arthur, Carla teased once. Keeps you honest about your vegetables. She keeps me young, he replied softly. Back home, Marianne watched their connection with wary gratitude. She'd lived long enough to know that peace, like happiness, can feel temporary. Still, she let it be. Some evenings she'd walk by the shop window after her shift, seeing her daughter perched on a stool, chin propped on hands, listening to the man speak about things half remembered. Those glimpses were worth more than any check. Yet, comfort rarely arrives without testing. Early October brought unseasonable cold and, with it, a faulty wire behind the beverage cooler. The spark came near closing one Thursday night while Mr. Blaine was writing invoices in the back office. Lila, sweeping near the counter, caught the scent first. Sharp plastic, faint smoke. She looked up just as a thread of flame licked the wall. Mr. Blaine, she shouted. He appeared instantly, heart pounding louder than the crackle. Her small hands found the extinguisher before he reached it, pulling the pin with trembling fingers. The foam hissed, clouding the room, smothering the budding fire. By the time the fire truck arrived, only scorch marks remained along the paneling. The chief shook his head. Another minute, the whole place could have gone. Mr. Blaine rested a hand on Lila's shoulder, voice cracking. Seems I owe you twice now. News spread through town faster than smoke. The paper ran another modest story. Girl saves store again. Lila blushed when classmates teased her, preferring to focus on homework rather than heroics. Marianne folded the clipping and tucked it into the Bible her husband had once carried, saying only, "Some blessings you keep paper thin." In the aftermath, repairs gathered neighbors like bees. The hardware store donated materials. Mrs. Boyle loaned her nephew for painting. Teens volunteered weekends to clean soot. Lila spent hours wiping jars and polishing the counterbell until it shone. Mr. Blaine watched from his stool, heart steady behind a web of medical tape. "Looks better than before," he said. Marianne agreed. Some damage just teaches light where to land. By winter, Harper's beams glowed honey bright under new bulbs. A small plaque hung near the register. In gratitude for courage without reward. Underneath, carved initials. AB and LB customers joked it stood for Arthur's Bakery, but those who knew smiled at the truth. Despite the improved business, Mr. Blaine's body lagged behind his optimism. The wheeze returned on damp days, forcing him to rest in the office while Lila managed small sales. Marianne often stopped by with soup or to cover shifts, insisting it wasn't charity. He'd reply, then its hospitality. One snowy afternoon, as Lila arranged the cookie display, she found him asleep at the counter, pen still in hand. Fear jolted her until she heard the soft wheeze steady beneath his scarf. He woke at her whisper and smiled weakly. "Don't worry, little partner. I was just listening to the shelves breathe." Something in his tone, gentle, far away, made her blink. Hard. "Promise you'll rest?" "As faithfully as you return lost tickets," he answered. Outside, snowflakes stuck to the windows, turning the view to watercolor. Lila closed early, pulling the sign to "See you tomorrow." She locked the door and stood beside him, small fingers laced through his wrinkled ones, waiting until his breathing found a peaceful rhythm again. Over the next weeks, life settled back into its quiet pulse. The store thrived. The town carried on. Marianne used a portion of her savings to clear their debts and set aside the rest in an envelope labeled College Fund. Whenever doubt rose, she'd press her palm over it and remember that integrity, not money, had built this safety. Sometimes, at night, she'd hear her daughter humming softly from her room, a tune Mr. Blaine taught her, the same one May once sang in the shop's early years. It drifted through the hallway like candlelight, fragile yet unwavering. Winter thinned into early spring, trees blushing with new leaves. The fire's scars faded to stories. The shop regained its hum. One evening, Marianne found Lila sketching the storefront in her notebook, bright awning, a tiny figure ringing the bell. "Thinking of summer again?" she asked. Lila nodded. "I'm drawing how it feels here now. Safe." Marianne brushed a thumb over the page. "That's what honesty built." Across town, in the quiet upper room above Harper's, Mr. Blaine sat by the window watching sunset spill gold on the river. His heart murmured unevenly, but calm. In a journal beside him, he wrote a single line. "Some fortunes stay only if shared." Then he closed the book, set it beside his wife's framed photo, and whispered toward the fading light, "We're all right, May." The child made sure of it. Below, Lila locked the register for the night, unaware that her small routine, the click, the half-turn, the soft smile, was the sound of legacy taking shape. Money had fixed roofs and debts, yes, but what it left mended were the unseen things. Trust, faith, the rhythm of doing right. When she flicked off the final switch, she caught her reflection in the window. Taller now, steadier. The bell above gave one faint jingle of its own accord, as if, agreeing, the town settled around her heartbeat, warm against the evening air. Spring returned with soft air and the smell of wet earth settling over the town. On the corner by the river bend, Harper's general store stood wrapped in scaffolding and pale primer. The fire repairs were nearly done, but the walls still bore the faint, sooty ghosts of their burned edges. When workers finished each section, neighbors drifted by to watch, passing thermoses and stories across the fence. It had become, without planning, a community project. Lila arrived every afternoon after school. She wore an old paint-stained cap and held a brush nearly as long as her forearm. "You missed a spot," one of the older boys teased. She grinned. "Then you'd better fix it." By the weekend, half the children in town had joined her, rolling fresh coats of cream on the siding. Marianne brought sandwiches, while Mr. Blaine sat on the stoop with a mug of tea, pretending to supervise, though his eyes misted more than once. When the front boards finally shone bright as summer corn, someone suggested painting a sign to celebrate the reopening. Lila volunteered first, sketching gentle letters across a wooden plank. She hesitated over what to write. That night, at home, she asked her mother, "What should it say so people remember?" Marianne thought for a moment. Something truthful. Something that lasts longer than luck. The next morning, she brought her finished sign to the store. "Honesty builds here." On rebuild day, sunlight spilled across the windows. The new paint gleamed, and the scent of fresh lumber mixed with coffee and sugar. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Children held balloons. Mr. Blaine arrived last, slower now but smiling, his suspenders crisp, his polished shoes a quiet defiance against age. He scanned the crowd until he spotted Lila adjusting her cap. "You ready, Foreman?" She giggled. "I thought you were the boss." I was. Then you came along. He reached into his pocket and drew out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. For you, he said. She untied it carefully. Inside lay the old brass counterbell, polished back to mirror shine. Her eyes widened. Isn't this for the store? It's for the heart of the store, he replied. And that's you. The crowd grew quiet as she held it up. The bell glimmered, sun catching its smooth curve. Go on, he said. Give it a ring. Let's open things proper. She raised her hand and struck it once. The note wasn't loud, but it carried a bright, clear chime that sliced through chatter and landed gentle on every ear. Applause followed, laughter too, the warm kind that feels like a small town breathing together. Marianne watched from the back edge of the crowd, one hand pressed to her chest. When Mr. Blaine stepped beside her, she spoke softly without taking her eyes from her daughter. You gave her back a kind of father, he swallowed. And she gave me back time. For a moment, they simply stood there while the children darted through bubbles and paint cans. The town looked whole again, the smell of polish and baked bread swirling in the air. Inside, Carla arranged shelves, pretending not to wipe her eyes. In the weeks that followed, the store regained its rhythm. The new bell became a ritual. Lila rang it each morning before opening and again at closing. One bright tone for gratitude, one for promise. Customers smiled at the sound, some pausing in the doorway just to listen. Word spread beyond the county. Travelers came asking for the girl from the story. Each time, Lila would laugh nervously and point to Mr. Blaine. He's the real story. He'd shake his head. I just kept the lights on. She brought the sunshine. The highway soon funneled more visitors into town than the grocery ever had. Still, nothing changed much inside. Prices stayed modest, the coffee free for retirees, and next to the register stood a small tin labeled Pay Kindness Forward. People dropped coins, notes, sometimes folded bills with scribbled wishes. Lila and Carla collected them monthly and used them for small things. Groceries for the widower down the lane, repairs for Mrs. Boyle's porch, crayons for the school art club. No announcement followed. The town simply knew. One late afternoon that summer, storm clouds stacked above the hills. Inside, the store glowed amber. Lila counted loose change while Mr. Blaine tallied receipts. When thunder rumbled, she jumped slightly. He smiled through the sound. You've heard worse storms than that. Yes, she admitted. But this time I don't worry if the roof holds. He laughed under his breath. That's worth more than a jackpot, isn't it? She nodded, serious. It is. The next week, the local paper published a small anniversary piece. Harper's reopens, a town's heart restored. The accompanying photo showed Lila behind the counter, her hand resting on the bell, Mr. Blaine's arm steady above her like a proud guardian. Many readers clipped it for their walls. Some mailed copies to relatives far away. Look what decency built, one caption read in pen across the border. By autumn, the store's floors bore traces of 1,000 shoes. Lila's handwriting appeared on shelf labels, neat and careful. A new community bulletin board filled with thank you notes, pinned in tidy rows. Above them hung framed photos of Rebuilding Day. Beneath, a small plaque read simply, "For the honest child who reminded us all." Evening came earlier then, gold sliding to blue. On one such night, Mr. Blaine locked the door and stood beside Lila at the counter. "Want to hear something funny?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Sure." "When I first came to this town," he said, "I thought business meant numbers adding up. Now I think it's neighbors adding faith." She smiled shyly. "That's better math." Outside, the air shifted cooler. A handful of people lingered, windows reflecting the neon glow of the newly hung sign, its words painted by tiny, patient hands. As they waved goodnight, collars turned up to the breeze. It struck him how simple it all was. A store, a girl, a rule remembered in rain. Weeks rolled into crisp mornings. Trees browned, shedding color like confetti across the sidewalk. The rhythm of ringing bell and steady customers pulsed on. Mr. Blaine's health wavered, but his spirit held firm. He often sat by the window bench, greeting children who peeked through, telling them tales of how kindness once won the lottery. Lila would listen from behind the counter, pretending not to blush when he called her the heroine. To her, she'd only done what her mother taught her, to do right, even when no one was watching. But seeing how one choice had stretched through lives, like the river carving its path, she began to understand that small actions weren't small at all. One evening near sunset, Marianne stopped by after her shift. The shop was quiet, the last customers gone. Lila polished the bell, while Mr. Blaine balanced the drawer. Marianne watched them, eyes warm. "Everything feels new, yet nothing's changed," she said. Mr. Blaine smiled. "That's the best kind of miracle." He handed her the day's ledger, pointing at the neat columns. "Take a look! The numbers behave again." She laughed softly. Then the universe must finally be grateful. Outside, twilight thickened. The three stood in easy silence until Lila gave the bell one last ring, a gentle note that lingered like breath before fading. Through the window, the streetlights blinked on one by one, casting halos on the freshly painted sign. People crossing the bridge paused at the sound, as if instinctively reminded that the town's heart still beat steady. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Mr. Blaine said quietly, "Some stories end. Good ones circle back." Marianne nodded, her hand resting on her daughter's shoulder. "And this one started the day she came in from the rain." Lila blushed, but grinned. "Do right, even when no one's watching." Mr. Blaine chuckled. "Yes, ma'am. Keep teaching us." The bell chimed again as they closed the door, the evening air cool and sweet. Overhead, clouds parted just enough to reveal a wash of stars. The town, small as ever, glowed beneath them. Steady, humble, alive. And for anyone passing by long after the lights dimmed, that single ringing note seemed to linger in the night, proof that honesty, once planted, keeps blooming whether or not anyone stands to see. The sun dipped low, pooling amber light across the counter of Harper's general store. The day's chatter had drifted home. Only the soft ticking of the wall clock remained. Lila stood behind the register, hands folded neatly. The new bell gleamed beside her, polished, smooth from countless touches. Marianne leaned on the doorway, coat draped over one arm. "Ready to close, honey?" Lila nodded and glanced at Mr. Blaine, resting in his corner chair. His eyes crinkled in faint amusement. "Go on, partner. Ring us home." She lifted the bell and let it sound once, clear and bright. The note filled the small shop, echoing softly against jars and windows before fading into evening quiet. He smiled. "You know, it was never the ticket," he said. "It was the honesty." Marianne stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And the faith you kept in it." Together they walked through the closing ritual. Cash drawer tallied, lights dimmed one by one. In the front window, the painted sign glowed faintly. "Honesty builds here." Outside, street lamps blinked on above puddle reflections. Lila turned the key and looked up at her mother, then back at the man who had become family. "Good night, Mr. Blaine." He tipped his cap. "Good night, child." As the door clicked shut, he whispered toward the empty space. "We're all right, May. Just as you hoped." If this story moved you, join our community for more tales of quiet courage and kindness. Subscribe so you don't miss our next story.